Welcome to the beginning, middle, and end of a tutoring session module. In this module, we'll begin to discuss the tutoring cycle and talk through the different steps of conducting a tutoring session. The tutoring cycle is a very standard method of conducting a tutoring session, and it is the scaffolding that we encourage you to use when engaging with students. We'll start with a brief overview of the tutoring cycle and then get into more detail of the steps. The tutoring cycle can be broken down into three main categories: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Now we'll cover the steps that make up these categories. The beginning, making the student feel welcome. Determining the goals of the session. Figuring out which topics they want to discuss, content they want to cover, or information that they want to review. The middle, the content coverage. And the end is an overview of what was covered, a plan for the potential next session, a see ya, and any other last minute reminders. There are many ways that you can begin a tutoring session. If it's your first session with a student, be sure to hang out towards the front of the tutoring center. It can be pretty intimidating for a student to come down here to begin with, and having to search for you can make it even more so. After you've greeted the student, introduce yourself and get settled. Ask them what brings them down today. They may have a specific section or equation or conjugation that they're having trouble with. In this case, ask to see their notes or slides or book so that you all can work together to find the disconnect in relation to the information. Students may also come down with no idea of where they want to begin. In this case, start with their class materials and see which concepts are trickiest for them. Go through each part of their notes and gauge their understanding. Ask how comfortable they are with a particular concept. If they say they get it, ask them to explain. Use this technique to have them solidify what they definitely know and potentially expose what they don't. There are many different ways to approach a session, but these are the two most common ways that a session will start. In any case, start with something that the student is comfortable with and go from there. Break it down for the student, letting them know what you plan to cover, and ask if there's anything else that they'd like to add. You can also let them know that they can change the course of the session at any time should they think of something else that they want to cover. After completing the first few steps of the tutoring cycle, you will get into the middle portion, which is the content. Once you find a good starting point with the student, there are several directions that you could take. Once you find a good starting point with the student, there are several directions that you could take. For applied subjects like math, physics, or chemistry, you could get the student up on the board to work out some example problems. For more memorization-based courses like biology or psychology, you could create note cards with the student and show them different ways to use those note cards effectively. Or you could attempt to use strategies like mnemonics or acronyms to make content easier to remember. For a history course, having the student talk through the information that they know can be helpful, because then you are both able to find where the holes are in their knowledge. Using a storytelling approach can be very effective, as it may be easier to remember than just a bulleted list of facts from lecture notes. One of the most basic ways that you can conduct a session is the use of the Socratic method. If you're not sure what that is, that's okay. We're going to go through it right now. According to Wikipedia, the Socratic method is a form of cooperative, argumentative dialogue between individuals based on asking and answering questions to stimulate critical thinking and to draw ideas and underlying presumptions. Another definition and explanation of the method, coming to us from the website of the University of Chicago Law School, shares that Socrates, the Greek philosopher, engaged his students in constant questioning. With these questions, he aimed to get to the foundation of their views, which would then expose the underlying contradictions and spark new opportunities for learning. The Socratic method, at its core, is meant to develop critical thinking skills in students. This method is meant to keep students skeptical when it comes to learning new things. This way, they are always thinking on a deeper level about why things are the way they are. This deeper level of thinking will ultimately lead to an intimate understanding of the material and also help to familiarize the student with the ways that they learn and think best when it comes to the course. Overall, the student will become a better learner by asking questions and being questioned throughout the learning process. So, what sort of questions should you ask? The very basics would be who, what, where, when, why, and how. These are really all you need when working with a student to understand their course content. Unless the student is asking for clarification or for an answer to a question, you should be probing the student for information, always testing their knowledge and gauging their level of understanding. This can, of course, begin with an explanation, but should ultimately lead to a question. For example, you could be working with a student and say, "This is the Pythagorean theorem." and then you explain the Pythagorean theorem. And then you ask the student, now can you tell me how to solve this example problem using the Pythagorean theorem? When the student begins to solve the problem, ask them, why did they start there? Ask them what to do next. And ask them, where should that product go in the equation? It can definitely seem redundant, but the more questions you ask and the students answer, the more they'll learn in the process. The one thing that a tutoring session should not be is a lecture. You are not the instructor. They've had enough of being talked at, and that's why they've come down to see us. You need to be sure that you are engaging the students. Ask them questions, put the pen in their hand, get them up on the whiteboard to draw it out. Whichever of those things makes the most sense to do, do. The students may get frustrated with you because you ask them so many questions throughout your sessions, but they will ultimately learn more this way. After you've made it through the content, you should bring the student to a good stopping place. Leave a little bit of time at the end of the session to be able to review what you covered together. The student should be able to share with you a summary of what all you discussed in that session. You should also try to ask them clarifying questions, solidifying the tricky parts of the material and allowing them once more to think through the information and provide an answer. You should then find out if the student will be scheduling another appointment with you and see if you can make a plan for the next session. You could do this by asking the student to quickly look over their syllabus or readings to figure out what the next lecture or two will be about. This way you can encourage the student to look over their readings in advance of lecture and also make a plan for your next session. If you reach the end of the content that the student wants to cover before the hour is up, pull out the syllabus and find out what's up next. If the student is willing to stay, you can begin to read through the book chapter or PowerPoint slides that correspond to the next section. A situation like this one is a good opportunity to help students develop their critical reading and thinking skills. All of your sessions should have the same basic layout, following these steps and tailoring the middle section to each student. While the tutoring cycle is simple, it is important, so please be sure to keep it in mind once you begin working with students this academic year.